Picture this. You're in the middle of a frozen battlefield, snow whipping across your face, boots sinking into mud, your stomach gnawing from lack of food. Every decision, every small action could mean life or death. This was not a hypothetical scenario. It was the stark reality for millions of soldiers during the Second World War, particularly on the unforgiving Eastern Front. In these extreme conditions, survival was not merely about combat prowess. It was a silent, desperate battle against the elements, a testament to human ingenuity and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. The skills they developed, born from sheer necessity, are some of the most profound lessons in survival history has to offer. Today, we will journey back in time, not to the grand strategies of generals, but to the individual soldier's struggle for life. We will uncover the hidden survival secrets they employed to endure unimaginable cold, find sustenance where there was none, and maintain the mental fortitude to see another dawn. These are not just historical anecdotes, they are timeless principles of survival, as relevant to the modern adventurer as they were to the soldier in the trench. We will explore how they mastered their environment, innovated under pressure, and ultimately survived against all odds. This is the untold story of endurance, a masterclass in survival taught by the quiet heroes of history. These lessons, forged in the crucible of war, can equip us with the knowledge to face our own challenges, whether in the wilderness or in our daily lives. If you're ready to explore the survival secrets that shaped real-world history, hit that like button, share this video with fellow enthusiasts, leave a comment with your favorite tactic, and make sure you subscribe to Warcraft Survival so you never miss these hidden stories. The first and most relentless enemy in a winter campaign is not the opposing army, but the cold itself. It is a silent, creeping foe that saps strength, dulls the mind, and claims lives without firing a single shot. For the soldiers of World War II, particularly in the brutal winters of Russia, mastering the cold was the primary condition for survival. Their first line of defence was not a fortress of stone, but one of fabric. The principle of layering, so fundamental to modern outdoor practice, was a life-saving doctrine learned through bitter experience. They understood that it wasn't the thickness of a single garment that provided warmth, but the trapped air between multiple looser layers. They would wear their standard-issue wool uniform, often supplemented with anything they could find. A captured greatcoat, a civilian sweater, even strips of blanket or parachute silk were incorporated into their attire. Each layer served to create an insulating barrier of still air, warmed by body heat, which dramatically slowed its escape into the frigid environment. This was a dynamic system. As they exerted themselves, layers could be removed to prevent sweating, which, if allowed to freeze, would become a fatal conductor of heat away from the body. It was a constant, delicate balance. Insulation extended to their extremities, the body's most vulnerable outposts. Feet, in particular, were a constant source of concern. Trench foot, a non-freezing cold injury, could incapacitate a soldier as effectively as a bullet. To combat this, they would stuff their boots with straw, dried grass, or even wads of newspaper. These materials not only provided extra insulation, but also helped to wick moisture away from the skin, a critical function in preventing tissue damage. The simple act of obtaining dry socks was a matter of life and death, and soldiers went to extraordinary lengths to keep their feet dry and insulated. Beyond personal clothing, the creation of effective shelter was paramount. The standard-issue tent, or a hastily dug foxhole, offered minimal protection against sub-zero temperatures and biting winds. Survival demanded improvisation. Soldiers learned to build upon these basic structures, using the very environment that threatened them as their primary building material. Snow, an excellent insulator, due to the air trapped within its crystals, was piled high against the walls of their shelters. This simple act could raise the internal temperature by several crucial degrees, making the difference between shivering through the night and getting a few hours of restorative sleep. The placement of these shelters was a science in itself, learned through observation and often through tragic error. A shelter dug on the windward side of a ridge would be mercilessly battered by the elements, while one on the leeward side, protected from the prevailing wind, offered a pocket of relative calm. They sought out natural windbreaks, stands of trees, rock outcroppings, or even the lee of a disabled tank. They learned to read the landscape not as a battlefield, but as a system of potential refugees. A shallow depression in the ground, invisible to the untrained eye, could become the foundation for a life-saving burrow. Inside these cramped spaces, further ingenuity was required. The floor of a foxhole would be lined with pine boughs, branches, or any available brush. This layer served a dual purpose. It insulated them from the frozen ground, which would otherwise leach precious body heat, and it provided a degree of comfort in an otherwise unforgiving environment. Several soldiers would huddle together, sharing body heat in a primal act of communal survival. This collective warmth was often the most reliable heat source they had. These techniques, born of desperation, are now core tenets of modern winter survival. The multi-layered clothing systems advertised by outdoor brands, the principles of snow shelters like quinzes and snow caves, and the critical importance of insulating oneself from the ground. All of these can be traced back to the hard-won knowledge of soldiers who faced the ultimate test. They were the unwilling pioneers of cold-weather survival, and their legacy is a blueprint for enduring the planet's harshest conditions. For the modern survivalist, studying their methods is not just a historical exercise. It is a profound lesson in resourcefulness and respect for the power of the cold. In the calculus of survival, warmth is the immediate priority, but hunger is the patient adversary that grinds down morale and strength over time. On the front lines, supply lines were often tenuous, unreliable, or non-existent. The standard rations, when they did arrive, were often frozen solid and nutritionally inadequate for the immense caloric demands of winter warfare. A soldier's existence became a continuous opportunistic search for anything that could provide energy. The landscape, though seemingly barren and hostile, held hidden sustenance for those with the knowledge to find it. Foraging became an essential, albeit risky, skill. Soldiers learned from local populations or through trial and error which plants were edible. Wild onions, garlic, and hardy root vegetables could be dug from the frozen earth. Rose hips, clinging stubbornly to their branches, provided a vital source of vitamin C, staving off scurvy. Even tree bark, specifically the inner cambium layer of certain pines, could be stripped and boiled into a nutrient-rich, if unpalatable, soup. This was not gourmet dining. It was a gritty, determined effort to extract calories from a desolate environment. Hunting, in the traditional sense, was often impossible due to the noise and the scarcity of large game. Instead, soldiers relied on trapping and opportunistic scavenging. Snares made from scavenged wire could catch small animals like rabbits or squirrels. They learned to look for signs of animal activity, reading the snow not just for enemy footprints, but for the tracks of a potential meal. The remains of a battle, a dead horse or livestock caught in the crossfire, were a grim but vital resource, providing meat that could be preserved by freezing or by smoking it over a low fire. The preservation of food was as important as its acquisition. When a rare bounty was secured, not a single calorie could be wasted. Meat would be cut into thin strips and dried, or frozen in the ambient air, to be gnawed on for days. Fats were rendered and stored, a precious high-energy resource that could be added to soups or consumed directly. Soldiers developed an instinct for conservation, hoarding small morsels of food, understanding that their current meal might be their last for an unknown period. This foresight was a mental discipline, a victory over the immediate desperate urge to consume everything at once. Cooking, too, required immense ingenuity. Fuel was scarce, and large fires were a beacon for the enemy. This led to the creation of makeshift stoves. The most common was the hobo stove, crafted from a discarded food tin or ammunition can. Holes punched in the sides allowed for airflow, while a small controlled fire could be built inside. This concentrated the heat, allowing a small amount of fuel, twigs, pine cones or scavenged scraps of wood to boil water or heat a can of rations with maximum efficiency and minimal smoke. These small personal fires became the heart of a soldier's small universe. Around them, frozen rations were thawed, and concoctions of foraged plants and scavenged meat were brewed into life-sustaining stews. The psychological impact of a warm meal, no matter how meagre, cannot be overstated. It was a moment of normalcy in a world of chaos, a small victory against the crushing forces of cold and hunger. It was a reminder of civilization and a powerful boost to morale, fueling not just the body, but the will to continue fighting. The adaptability demonstrated by these soldiers is a powerful lesson. They transformed from consumers of centrally provided rations to hunter-gatherers and innovators. They learned to see a battlefield as an ecosystem, albeit a brutal one, with resources to be exploited. For the modern survivalist, this mindset is key. The ability to look beyond the intended use of an object and see its potential, to view the natural world not as an obstacle, but as a pantry, and to practice the discipline of conservation. Their struggle teaches us that ingenuity is the most valuable ration of all. Surrounded by a world of frozen water, a soldier could still die of thirst. This cruel paradox was a constant reality in winter warfare. Consuming snow directly was a grave mistake, a lesson often learned tragically. It would drastically lower core body temperature, expending more energy to warm the ingested snow than the body would gain from the water. This could accelerate the onset of hypothermia, turning a potential solution into a fatal problem. Therefore, the first and most inviolable rule of winter water procurement was never eat snow for hydration. The only safe method was to melt it. This seemingly simple task was fraught with challenges. It required fuel, which was a precious and finite resource, and a container, which also might be in short supply. Every drop of water represented a cost in energy and resources. Efficiency was not a matter of convenience, it was a matter of survival. Soldiers learned to start the melting process not with a pot full of snow, but with a small amount of seed water at the bottom. Packing a pot with snow and placing it directly over a flame would often scorch the bottom of the pot before any significant melting occurred, potentially ruining the container. By starting with a little water, the snow could be added gradually, melting as it made contact with the liquid rather than the hot metal. This prevented scorching and maximised the efficiency of the heat transfer. Soldiers would often keep a canteen partially filled for this very purpose, guarding it carefully against freezing. They became masters of fuel conservation, using their hobo stoves to melt just enough snow for their immediate needs, capturing every last bit of heat from their tiny fires. A pot of melting snow was a common sight, a slow but steady process that was central to their daily routine. Once melted, the water presented another danger contamination. The snow they gathered could be tainted with bacteria, viruses, or chemical residues from the battlefield. Melted water from any source in a field environment is never guaranteed to be safe. The only way to be certain was to bring the water to a rolling boil for at least 1 minute. This act of purification was non-negotiable. Dysentery or other waterborne illnesses could incapacitate a soldier as surely as any enemy weapon, and in a weakened state it was often a death sentence. Conserving this precious, hard-won water was the next critical step. A full canteen was a lifeline. Soldiers had to protect it from freezing, which could not only render the water undrinkable, but also split the canteen open. At night they would sleep with their canteens inside their coats, or even inside their sleeping bags, using their own body heat to keep the water in its liquid state. During the day, it was carried close to the body. This constant management of their water supply was a vital part of their mental checklist for survival. The foresight required for water management was immense. A soldier had to constantly be thinking ahead. How much fuel do I have? How long until I can next resupply or build another fire? Is the snow I'm gathering from a clean source, away from latrines or chemical spills? This strategic thinking, applied to the most basic of human needs, separated those who survived from those who succumbed. It was a microcosm of the larger war, a battle of logistics, resource management, and anticipating the next move of a deadly opponent, in this case, dehydration. Today we have portable water filters and purification tablets, but the fundamental principles remain unchanged. The lessons from the front lines teach us the importance of process. melting snow correctly, purifying it without fail, and protecting it from the elements. They remind us that in a survival situation, water is never to be taken for granted. It is a product of work, foresight, and a deep understanding of the environment. The image of a soldier patiently melting snow over a tiny flame is a powerful symbol of the methodical patience required to stay alive. In the biting cold of a winter war, fire was more than just a tool for warmth and cooking. It was a psychological anchor, a tiny island of civilization in a sea of frozen hostility. Yet an open fire was a double-edged sword. Its light and smoke could betray a position to the enemy, attracting mortar fire or a sniper's attention. The challenge, then, was to harness the power of fire while minimizing its risks. This led to a mastery of small, efficient, and often smokeless fires that provided maximum benefit for minimal exposure. The foundation of any successful fire is tinder and fuel, and in a snow-covered landscape, dry materials were worth more than gold. Soldiers became expert foragers of flammable materials. They would search for dry twigs on the lower, dead branches of pine trees, sheltered from the snow by the canopy above. Birch bark, rich in flammable oils, was a prized fire starter, capable of catching a spark, even when damp. They would collect lint from their pockets, fray the edges of dry cloth, or shave fine slivers of wood to create a tinder bundle that could be coaxed to life with the smallest spark. Conserving the fire, once it was established, was an art form. It was often too dangerous or resource-intensive to start a new fire from scratch. Instead, they would preserve the embers. A small, smouldering piece of charcoal or a punk of dried fungus could be carefully wrapped in moss or cloth and placed inside a metal container like, say, a tobacco tin with a few air holes punched in it. This ember box could be carried in a pocket, keeping the ember alive for hours, ready to be revived into a flame when needed. This technique decoupled the act of fire starting from the need for a spark or flame, which was a significant advantage in harsh conditions. Maximizing the heat from their small, often subterranean fires was critical. A fire dug into a small pit, known as a Dakota fire hole, would conceal the flames from view and burn more efficiently. To radiate the precious heat towards themselves, soldiers would employ reflective surfaces. A simple trick was to build the fire in front of a wall of snow, which, despite being frozen, would reflect a surprising amount of infrared radiation back towards the shelter. A more effective method was to use a blanket, a spare piece of canvas, or a sheet of metal scavenged from wreckage to create a heat reflector behind them, bouncing the warmth onto their backs. This principle of heat reflection was applied inside their shelters as well. A single candle or a small lard lamp, while producing little convective heat, emitted a significant amount of infrared radiation. By lining the wall behind the flame with a piece of shiny tin from a can or even a polished mess kit, they could direct that radiant heat towards the occupants of the foxhole. This small act could perceptibly raise the feeling of warmth, providing a significant psychological boost and helping to keep the damp chill at bay. The management of smoke was another critical skill. To avoid creating a plume of smoke that would give away their position, soldiers learned to use dry, seasoned hardwoods whenever possible, as these burn hotter and cleaner than sappy softwoods. They would often build their fires in 2 stages, a small, hot core fire to get a good bed of coals, onto which larger pieces of fuel could be added. This method minimized the smoky initial phase of combustion. In some cases, they would even try to channel the smoke along the ground or through a makeshift chimney to disperse it less obviously. These techniques demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of thermodynamics, learned not in a classroom, but in the unforgiving school of survival. The principles of the Dakota fire hole, the use of heat reflectors, and the preservation of embers are now standard knowledge for serious survivalists. The soldiers of the Second World War, through necessity, became masters of firecraft. They learned to tame the flame, making it a stealthy and efficient servant in their fight for life, proving that even in the most desperate of circumstances, a small, well-managed flame can hold the darkness at bay. In the relentless attrition of winter warfare, the final and most critical battle was fought not on the frozen ground, but in the landscape of the human mind. Physical tools and skills were essential, but without the psychological resilience to employ them, a soldier was lost. The will to live, the mental toughness to endure unimaginable hardship, was the ultimate survival tool. This resilience was not an innate trait for most. It was a discipline, forged and tempered in the crucible of constant adversity. One of the cornerstones of this mental fortitude was the establishment of routine. In a world defined by chaos and uncertainty, creating small, predictable rituals provided a sense of order and purpose. The methodical cleaning of a rifle, the daily task of melting snow for water, the careful inspection of one's feet for frostbite, these were not just chores, but anchors. They broke the overwhelming enormity of survival down into manageable, moment-to-moment tasks. By focusing on the immediate, a soldier could prevent his mind from being crushed by the weight of a seemingly hopeless future. Adaptability was the mind's primary weapon against a constantly changing environment. The original plan, the doctrine learned in training, rarely survived contact with reality. Soldiers had to think on their feet, to see a problem not as a dead end, but as a puzzle to be solved with the limited pieces available. A broken-down truck was not just wreckage, it was a source of sheet metal for a stove, wiring for snares, and canvas for a windbreak. This creative problem-solving, this ability to repurpose and innovate, kept the mind engaged and hopeful. It transformed a soldier from a passive victim of circumstance into an active agent of his own survival. A sense of purpose beyond one's own survival was another powerful psychological buffer. This often came from camaraderie, the profound bond forged between soldiers who depended on each other for their very lives. Looking out for a comrade, sharing a last piece of bread, or taking a turn on watch while others slept, shifted the focus from individual suffering to collective responsibility. This sense of duty to the group provided a powerful reason to keep going when personal motivation waned. The survival of the individual was inextricably linked to the survival of his unit, his brothers in arms. Humour, even in the darkest of times, was a vital coping mechanism. Gallows humour, Cynical jokes about their miserable conditions served to release tension and create a sense of shared experience. It was a way of acknowledging the absurdity of their situation without surrendering to despair. Laughter in a frozen trench was an act of defiance. It was a declaration that even in the face of death and misery, the human spirit could not be entirely extinguished. It provided a momentary escape, a brief respite that could make the unbearable bearable. Visualization and maintaining a positive mental outlook, however difficult, also played a role. Soldiers would talk of home, of the meals they would eat, of the loved ones they would see again. This was not mere daydreaming. It was a conscious effort to maintain a connection to a world beyond the war, to a future worth fighting for. Holding on to these images, these hopes, provided a powerful counter-narrative to the despair that surrounded them. It was a reminder that the present reality, however terrible, was not permanent. The mind, therefore, was the master tool that directed all others. It was the mind that forced the body to get up in the freezing morning, that drove the search for fuel and food, that maintained the discipline of water purification, and that found the strength to help a fallen comrade. The lessons in psychological resilience from the front lines are perhaps the most profound of all. They teach us that in any survival situation, your most important asset is the unwavering belief in your own ability to endure, to adapt, and to find a reason to take the next step. The experiences of soldiers in the Second World War are not confined to the pages of history. They are a living textbook of survival, filled with practical, actionable lessons that are as relevant today as they were 80 years ago. When we strip away the context of combat, we are left with the pure, unvarnished principles of enduring in extreme environments. For the modern survivalist hiker, or anyone who ventures into the wild, these historical lessons provide a robust and field-tested foundation for safety and self-reliance. The principle of layering, which we examined earlier, is now the standard doctrine for all cold-weather outdoor activities. Modern materials like fleece and Gore-Tex have replaced wool and canvas, but the concept of trapping air between layers remains identical. The soldier's desperate improvisation with straw and newspaper in his boots teaches us a critical lesson. Even with modern gear, we must be prepared to improvise insulation and moisture management to prevent cold injuries like frostbite and trench foot. History reminds us that our gear can fail, and knowledge is the ultimate backup. The ingenuity of the hobo stove is a powerful lesson in resourcefulness and efficiency. It teaches us to look at a simple tin can not as trash, but as a potential life-saving tool. This mindset, the ability to see the hidden potential in everyday objects, is the hallmark of a true survivalist. The soldier's meticulous fuel conservation reminds us that in any situation with limited resources, efficiency is paramount. Whether using a modern camp stove or a handmade one, the goal is the same: to extract the maximum amount of energy from the minimum amount of fuel. The methodical approach to water procurement, melting snow correctly, always purifying and protecting it from freezing, is a timeless protocol. We may have advanced filters and chemical tablets, but the underlying dangers of contamination and hypothermia from eating snow have not changed. The soldier's experience is a stark reminder to never cut corners with water safety. It reinforces the discipline required to turn a hazardous environment into a source of life-sustaining hydration, a skill essential for any winter expedition. The mastery of firecraft, particularly the use of reflectors and concealed fire pits, translates directly to modern wilderness skills. A space blanket, a standard item in any survival kit, is simply a modern, highly efficient version of the soldier's scavenged heat reflector. The Dakota fire hole remains one of the most effective and stealthy ways to build a fire, a technique taught in advanced survival courses today. History teaches us not just how to make a fire, but how to manage it intelligently to maximize its benefits while minimizing its risks. Perhaps the most important lesson is the emphasis on psychological resilience. The soldier's use of routine, camaraderie, and purpose to combat despair is a powerful model for anyone facing a high-stress situation. Breaking down a seemingly insurmountable problem into small, manageable tasks is a core principle of emergency management. Maintaining a positive mental attitude and a will to survive is often cited by modern-day survivors as the single most important factor in their rescue. The mind is the ultimate arbiter of our fate. By studying these hidden secrets of Second World War survival, we are doing more than just learning about the past. We are arming ourselves with knowledge that has been tested under the most extreme pressure imaginable. We are learning to think like survivors, to be adaptable, resourceful, and mentally tough. The soldiers who endured those terrible winters left behind a legacy of resilience. It is our responsibility and our advantage to learn from it, ensuring that their hard-won wisdom is never forgotten. The story of the Second World War soldier's survival is a profound testament to the strength of the human spirit. In the face of unimaginable adversity, they did not just endure. They adapted, innovated, and discovered a deep well of resilience within themselves. Their struggle, fought in the silence between battles, offers us more than just historical facts. It provides a blueprint for survival, a guide to mental fortitude, and a deep appreciation for the simple necessities of life: warmth, water, food, and companionship. These are not just soldiers' stories. They are human stories, echoing with lessons that transcend time and circumstance. As we've seen, the techniques they developed out of sheer necessity have become the cornerstones of modern survival knowledge. From the science of layering to the art of the smokeless fire, their legacy informs how we prepare for and interact with the natural world today. By understanding their challenges and solutions, we gain a more profound respect for both the unforgiving power of nature and our own capacity to overcome. The past is not a distant country. It is a landscape rich with wisdom, waiting for us to explore it. The greatest honor we can pay to those who endured these hardships is to learn from them. Their experience, paid for at a terrible price, is a gift of knowledge. We hope this journey into their world has equipped you with a new perspective on survival and history. If you found this guide valuable, make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, leave a comment with your favorite survival tactic, and subscribe to Warcraft. Survival, to continue uncovering the hidden side of history. Stay curious, stay prepared, and never stop learning from the past. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated for more incredible stories from history.